Morning, everyone. Good morning. You're welcome to today's session where we'll be discussing effective strategies for communicating research findings to a scientific audience. You're welcome once again. And just before we start, a few things for us to note. Please, if we have any questions during the course of the presentation, you can either use the chat box at any point during the presentation, or you use the hand raise icon during the question and answer session after the presentation. We can always drop our questions in the chat box during the course of the presentation, or we wait till after the presentation. We're going to be having a question and answer session where you can use the hand raise icon, you would be recognized, and then you would ask your question. Ladies and gentlemen, this session has been organized by the Plus-Circle Community Advancement Organization, an organization that is dedicated to improving community health through education, services, and evidence-based research. Over the years, the organization has impacted thousands through several projects, including community-based medical outreaches in Osun, Ekiti, and other states in Nigeria. They've organized trainings for community pharmacists towards the prevention of COVID-19 in Kwara State. They've organized sensitization of community members of face masks and hand washing to prevent the transmission of infection. They've organized health education outreaches towards reducing internet addiction among high school students in Oyo State, and so much more. You can always follow the organization on her social media handles on Instagram, on X, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. We'll be posting the social media handles on the chat box so you can easily get access to the channels for updates. Without further ado, I'll be finally introducing our speaker today, Anoluwapo A. Afolabi. Anolupa, I'll be reading her bio shortly before she comes up. Anoluwapo is a public health researcher with interest in community health development, epidemiology, reproductive health, and global health. She is a PhD candidate of the Public Health Program at Nasarawa State University, Kefi, Nigeria. Anoluwapo has more than 80 scientific articles in local and international peer-reviewed journals with high impact factor. She has obtained certificates in professional communication, developing, mentoring, and supporting youth leadership, and advancing the role of women in politics, peace, and security, and economic institutions from the Young African Leaders Initiative Network, YALI. She also holds certificates in information management, multi-sectoral coordination, and response during public health emergencies from the Public Health Emergency Operations Center of the African Centers for Disease Prevention and Control, Africa CDC. In addition, she obtained a certificate of competence in reproductive and family health from the University College Hospital, Ibadan, Nigeria. She also completed a professional training program on field research organized by the Development Impact Evaluation Group of the World Bank. Anoluwapo Afolabi combines professional academic work with public health practice. She is a board member and reviewer for many journals. She leads community-based health promotion and capacity building programs at Plus-Circle Community Health Advancement Organization. With an unending passion for knowledge sharing and improving community health, she drives innovations and education at the grassroots. Ladies and gentlemen, please make welcome our speaker for today, Anoluwapo A. Afolabi. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and welcome to this session. Kindly confirm you can hear me, please.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So, good morning, everyone. In today's outline, In today's outline, we would be in today's session rather, would be following this outline, and I promise that it's going to be participatory and an exciting session for us all. Okay, so unfortunately we couldn't proceed to launch the poll, but in the chat box, I would like to ask, what do you think are the most common mistake researchers make when sharing their findings with peers? Over time, you and I have participated in listening to some research findings being shared in some events or fora. So I would like us to use the chat box to type in what mistake do we think, having listened to researchers share their findings, what mistake do you and I think most of them make, or most other researchers make when sharing their findings? Okay, please let's engage using the chat box. Let's use the chat box. Do we have any chat yet on the mistake you think researchers make when sharing their findings with peers, when communicating their research findings? What do you think they make? What mistakes do you think they make? Do we have anyone? Okay. Stakeholder mapping not done properly. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Stakeholder mapping. That's one significant thing. All right. Any other one? Okay. So, okay, we have one other. Not conducting a target audience analysis. Amazing. Thank you so much. Many sound too technical. Yeah. Okay, unclear research objectives. Okay. Okay, so we have inappropriate communication of research outcomes to implementers, including programs, policymakers, community development impact evaluators. Thank you very much, everyone, for sending this. Poor timing, yeah, there is time for everything, okay? So now we have talked about what other researchers have done. We've talked about the mistakes they make. So personally speaking, I would like to ask, what is the one thing you struggle most with when you are communicating your research findings? I would like us to drop it also in the chat so that we can be able to address some of them in today's session. The struggles, some of the difficulties you experience while communicating your own research findings. So this is quite personal now, and I believe that today's session would help us demonstrate. It will be quite practical, and it will help us address all these maybe not all, but a couple of these difficulties, and you'll be glad you attended this session. So let's engage using the chat box. What is the one thing, just one, there may be a couple of those things that we consider difficult in communicating our research findings, but what is the one thing you struggle with most? Okay, so while we are waiting contributions from others, I would like to share my own personal experience. So, okay, when I started research, it wasn't clearly defined, or that, oh, now I am about to enter or venture into research. So based on my own experience, I found it difficult to understand odds ratio and other statistics. It was quite difficult. And thanks to my mentors then, they were able to clarify this. So this was one of the struggles I encountered when I was communicating research findings. I understood English, I understood how to write essays, but I couldn't understand statistics and the relevance of statistics in research. Okay, so let's check what others have to say. Who to communicate to and access, okay? Then we have inability to communicate in simple terms, the research findings, such that anyone can easily understand. Amazing. So we'll be addressing this and a couple of other difficulties or other gaps we have previously identified. Welcome again to the session. So I would like to start by saying that it is important for us to share research, our research findings. We shouldn't keep our research findings in the corner of our rooms, in the corner of our apartments, or under or within our bookshelf. Even when we conduct research as a requirement to bag a degree or to complete a fellowship or residency training program, it is important we share our results, as this allows other researchers to critique and build upon it. It is wherever someone's research ends, that is where another person begins. So it is like layers of bricks being built on each other. And it is quite fundamental to the scientific research process. Knowledge sharing, research sharing is very, very important. Without research, we wouldn't be able to understand the emerging infectious diseases, the pattern of transmission, and the rest. So it is important we share our research. And in sharing our research, we have seen, and this was also confirmed by some of our colleagues on this call, that usually scientific vocabulary often uses too technical terms and jargon, and this may not be understandable or may not be understood by someone in a non-scientific field. And we have experts across different fields that use different communication products, including articles that are published online, grant applications, presentations, and research talks. So all of these need evidence. Many times we say we do evidence-based public health, we do evidence-based medicine. All our research should be grounded on evidence. So at times when we communicate, we make it difficult for other people to understand. We use abbreviations, SRH, FP, NCD. Those may not be understandable or understood to non-scientific experts, and it may not be understood by scientific experts that are not in our own field. So this emphasizes that we need to highlight the significance and impact of our research across different target audience. So what then are the key factors that we need to consider in scientific communication? There are three factors that I would like to emphasize, and every other action that we take revolve around these three factors. So the first is the purpose. Why are you conducting this research, or why did you conduct the research? The purpose must be clarified. The purpose. Why this? So we need to ensure that that is clear even from the outset before we even conduct or dive into conducting the research. There must be a justification. Why do you want to do this? So it must answer a question. Oh, I want to conduct this research, or I conducted this research because of X, Y, Z reasons. And usually, like we do say, these reasons to be grounded in evidence and to be relatable to the audience, we need to ensure that these things have the human factor in place, like human feeling or animal feeling. For as many of us that are working in the field of environmental health or One Health, there must be the benefits to the community. So if this, and the community can be diverse: animal community, human community, plant community, and the rest. So there must be a purpose for conducting the research. Now, who is the audience? Audience, that is another factor. Who needs to listen to this presentation? Every communication is not meant for everybody on earth. So we need to clearly map who should listen, who are the people that need to take action, who need to be informed about this research, who need to implement policies, who need to change or modify existing policies. So that relates to the audience who needs to be here. So that needs to be clear, even whether for research or for programs that we have implemented and we want to communicate the findings. We need to clarify this so that people who don't need to listen will not be invited. We need action. Research should be complemented with actions. When we make recommendations, it is a call to action to a group of people. So those groups of people must be present to listen in to our presentation or to our communication. Then the format. How do I present this to this particular audience? What format do they listen to usually? If I have a if I want to communicate a scientific finding to the coordinating minister for health and social welfare, I need to think through it. Would he prefer a physical meeting or podcasts? What does he use? What format is he used to? So these things need to be clarified completely, and these factors would be talking about them in further details. Now, so for the first step, we're talking about audience. Who is your audience? So we need to create a profile of our audience for each communication, for each piece of evidence that we want to share. We need to create a profile of our audience. And this pertains to who will receive this communication. How and where will they receive the communication? A couple of times, some of us have been invited to present 1 minute pitches on our research findings. Maybe you meet a policymaker by the walkway and the person gives you just 1 minute. So we need to be able to synthesize our information with the audience and the timing that applies at that point. Now, also, in creating a profile for the audience, we need to know their expertise, their level of experience concerning the subject matter. If someone is an expert, is a leading professional in mpox in Nigeria, I need to be able to understand his level of expertise so that I'll be able to conserve time. I wouldn't need a lot of introduction. Good morning, sir. Mpox refers to. He does not need it. He wants me to hit the nail on the head directly. Then we need to understand the motivation for these people to receive that communication. Like we said, there are different communications for different audience. So we need to ensure that our audience we need to ensure that their needs are met. We need to ensure that they have met needs and people feel fulfilled having listened to our conversation, having listened to the communication. Each audience have distinct interests and they have different motivations. While expert audience can query some things and ask questions and probe further, some others may not probe. They just want evidence. What did you find? What are the gaps? And just go straight to the point. So we need to ensure that we clarify the audience and we create a profile for them. It is better we document this and not just put it on our mind, because we can miss out on some relevant audience or some relevant people who need to listen to our presentation. If I want to conduct or share the research findings for a national study on AIDS, HIV and AIDS, I need to include or invite people from NACA. That's because these are the people who influence and drive HIV implementation. So, in understanding our audience, likewise, we need to choose words that they are familiar with. While expert scientists in our own field will benefit well from the use of technical terms and jargon, there are also experts in another scientific field that may not be too used to the technical terms in our own field. Previously, I undertook some courses in human anatomy, and by the time you start saying protuberance, occipitofrontalis, those are medical jargon, right? Another person in the field of health may not understand this. So we need to break down the messaging for each audience, and we need to ensure that we tailor the content and language to the needs and interests of experts or of the audience, so that we don't either assume they know too much or they understand what we are saying, and secondly, to ensure that we don't talk down on them or to them, as this will interfere with audience engagement and the aim of our communication. We know that we want to keep our audience engaged throughout every session. So we need to ensure that they are engaged from start to finish. Okay, so these are examples of different categories of experts, and they differ across fields. So we need to be able to correctly map our audience and their interests. So for the second step, we mentioned earlier that the purpose of the communication must be clarified. And I have put this directly in three groups. Now, the why must be clarified completely. Why are you creating this scientific communication? Why this now? Why this now? So timing is also very important. Timing is very important. If perhaps someone wants to produce a brief, an evidence brief on COVID-19, pattern and prevalence of COVID-19 at this point, it is no more a thing of urgent concern. The people are no, we have gone past that now. Mpox is the current thing. So if it is something related to Mpox, everybody wants to listen. So there is a time factor that we need to consider every time we want to communicate our research findings as researchers. Now, if someone at this point is thinking of, oh, I want to talk about knowledge, attitude, and practices of market women about COVID-19, we don't need it anymore at this point. But during the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic, between March and December 2020, journals were willing to publish such findings as this for free at no cost. They waived article processing charges. But now they are not interested because we have transitioned over time. So we need to ensure that we clarify the essence of the scientific communication at any particular time. Now, secondly, what challenge or problem does this communication respond to? So there must be a problem that needs a solution, and that solution is embedded in your communication. So if we do not address this, everybody comes with a question that, okay, what is the value added? So there must be a value that our communication aims to add at all points. At all points, what value, what problem is it solving? What challenge did you identify that this communication is responding to at this point? Now, thirdly, what do you want the scientific communication product to accomplish? We should not take actions or ask audience, people to converge without having an aim. Oh, this is I want this to happen. This is the success metric. We want to drive this. So it must be clearly laid out whenever we want to communicate any research finding. Remember, these people, these policymakers, they do not have luxury of time. So it must be justifiable. It must have a reason. It must have a reason. So if we clearly respond to these questions, even we ourselves as researchers at that point would have been able to clearly articulate our own motivations for the communication, for the practice or the event of communicating our research evidence, and then the outcome we hope to achieve. The outcome we hope to achieve. When you were invited to this session, we had an outcome we wanted to achieve, and it resonated with you, and that made you join this meeting. It is because our interests are harmonized. That is why you are here. If it does not resonate with you, you wouldn't have joined. So we need to clearly articulate our own motivations, and we should look at research findings and communication of research findings the same way we look at normal life events. If I don't need to be present at a party, then I should not be invited. So it is just that same way. So when we clearly identify the needs, we would be able to um, distinctly develop what our success metrics would be. And then step 3, the format. The format is very, very important. And we need to select a format that fits the need of the communication. We have different people on LinkedIn that communicate. We have journalists, we have broadcasters, but there is a platform for different, or there is a format rather, for different communication needs. There is a platform, there is a format, and we need to ensure that the format we are proposing fits the need of the population while ensuring optimal engagement of the audience. And we also need to think, I mentioned something like this, similar to this earlier. We need to think like our audience. At times I do this so that I can picture clearly what the needs of the people I want to communicate with would be. When we think about this, we put ourselves in their shoes, and then we'll think like them. We objectively analyze, oh, what does this person, or what do these categories of people listen to? Is it academic journals and posters? We may not see a policy maker attend a conference or go to the exhibition booth to look at the posters. It may not happen, but there are other channels through which we can reach these people and communicate our research findings to them. Do we need to organize a television program? If we are organizing television programs, many times this relates more to people in the communities. Television programs, radio programs, music, and the rest. So this relates more with people in the community. If I want to communicate a research finding to community women, my grandmother in the village, I don't need to present technical jargon and the rest. She does not understand. So we need to establish the fact that there are different formats for diverse audiences. And the formats can actually either constrain the communication or enhance the communication. And the format informs the style of the presentation and the content of the presentation. Now, this is talking about the fact that there are different communication genre and formats. So there are different formats, whether written and visual, whether oral and visual, whether written only or oral only. So we need to clearly identify, what do this audience listen to? What do they resonate with, or what resonates with them? And then we tailor our communication directly to meet their needs. Now, while there are different types of formats, we should understand the fact that there is no perfect format at every point. So this emphasizes that we need to clearly evaluate the strengths of each format and the weaknesses, and we try to minimize the weaknesses as much as possible. Now, for a live talk as this, it can minimize interactions with the audience. It can maximize rather interactions with the audience, allowing the speaker to establish rapport. Now there will be a Q&A session, just like the moderator emphasized earlier, and would be able to relate real time and respond to questions. Now, a pre-recorded video presentation, on the other hand, may also provide the benefits of a live talk, but that physical interaction, that observation of gestures and the rest may not be there. So if I need gestures during my presentation, during the communication, I may need to ensure that I organize a live event. Now, the live event on its own relies on consistent attention from audience. Now, when I look at my audience and I see that they are not interested in listening to the conversation, or they are bored, it may disrupt my own flow. It may disrupt my flow as a communicator, as a presenter, and people are likely to be distracted, and they may not be able to re-engage with the presentation. So it pertains to the fact that we need to clearly map what is the strength and weakness of the format I have decided to choose. For the strength, I need to maximize the strength, and for the weaknesses or constraints, I need to minimize it as much as possible to ensure audience engagement from start to finish. Over time, we have emphasized that scientific findings is usually structured in the following categories. We have the introduction, the methods, the results, and discussion or conclusion. So usually it follows this approach most times. And when we adopt this approach, it's the introduction gives a background of what we have done, including the justification. Why this? What problem did you want to solve at time T, at that particular time? Oh, we wanted to solve this XYZ problem. We have observed that in Ekiti State, there is a high rate of teenage pregnancy according to the NDHS 2018. That is a problem. And that is not contestable. Nobody can query it because it was grounded on evidence and national source documents. So then the methods, we talk about, oh, what did we do? How did we do what we did? That needs to be clear. Then the results, what did we find? Discussion or conclusion, and recommendations. So usually when preparing recommendations, I strongly suggest to people that the recommendations should be actionable. It should be actionable. Who is responsible? It should be clearly spelled out. Not that we are just saying the government should. Who is the government? Which arm of government? Which sector? Which department? Who is responsible? So this should be clear so that by the time we are communicating our evidence, everybody is leaving the whether a physical or virtual venue or the podcasts at its end or at any other of such a platform. Everyone is living with a take home, with an action plan, which we have called them to. So this needs to be clear, right? Okay. So the features of the genre and the reader's expectations, we have said this earlier, it could place some constraints, but it helps readers or the audience to quickly orient themselves to the format. If I've been used to a format, it may be easier for me to understand what they are saying on that format or on that platform. And it may help myself and other audiences engage better. But if I have never used Zoom and someone is calling me to join a meeting on Zoom, I may not understand. And it's but I may have to grapple with the difficulty of navigating, how to register for the meeting, how to join, and the rest. So if after I successfully join, maybe 15 minutes into the presentation, I may not be able to hold on to anything significant at the end of the communication exercise or event. So we need to ensure that we leverage platforms that are suitable to our audience. And while we do the mapping or analysis of the format, we need to emphasize the strengths and weaknesses and work within them to achieve our goals and keep our audience engaged. Now, I would like to also emphasize that every research, no matter how complex it is a story. It has a storyline. Just like you and I would not want a boring movie, right? Movies, there are movies and there are movies. Movies have categories. Research articles, research findings, research works generally have categories. And every research has its own story to tell, including the significance, the introduction which covers the background, the some part of the literature review, the problem, and the reason why you are conducting it. So that's the significance. So every research has its own story to tell. Let your research tell the story. Let it tell its own complete story. Every research is different in its own form. So it should have a difference that it is making in the world. Recently, I watched a 12-minute clip organized by Sima Studios. It was talking about bleaching among adolescents in, I think, Sierra Leone or one of the African countries. And it resonated with me. I am not a policymaker, but first of all, it was not a too long video. Secondly, I understood it better because it had the human touch. The adolescents talked about their motivations for bleaching their skin because they wanted to gain acceptance by boyfriends and the rest. It resonated with me because one, I am interested in adolescent health. So the adolescents were willing to share their experiences, so it had human touch. And thirdly, it had video. It had video. So we need to ensure that the format we use resonates with our audience. I have emphasized this a couple of times. And each research has an independent story to tell. So, like, usually stories transition. It gets to, from a starting point, it gets to a midpoint or the peak, and then it dives down towards a conclusion. Every story, every movie goes through these routes. So, our research findings must also have a story to tell. It must not be all flat from start to finish. There should be a peak where interest of audience are captured completely. And then from that point, we take them to our conclusion, which is the crux or the destination of the story that our research is telling. Okay? So at every phase, oh, what changed? At what point did it change? What were the drivers of the change? We need to bring this out clearly. So to identify the significance of your research, you need to tell the story. Every research has its story. Every research has its story. I've seen some video abstracts. In fact, there was one of the journals I submitted a publication to. The publication was co-authored by myself and some of my colleagues. That was population medicine. Yes. The journal actually prepared a video abstract. I think a 1 minute video abstract of the research, and I was amazed. It was on cigarette smoking among adolescents in the US. It was amazing. It was amazing. So we need to tell the story. Every research has a script. It has a script. Look for the script and bring out the scripts. Bring out the script. So, like I said, there is a sequence in telling our story in research. There should be a problem. Why did you do the research? At times, we may think, oh, people just produce movies and the rest. People don't just produce movies. There are boring movies. There are boring research articles. There are boring evidence briefs. There are boring podcasts. Why will some be boring and others be interesting? There are people who turn out some research articles, and within 2-3 days, you have over 1,000 reads. More than 1,000 people would have read them. There are some people who produce movies, and within 3 days, you have over 3 million views. What is the difference? The problem was clearly identified. The problem is the research question. And like we said, it must have the touch, the human touch. The human touch. In this case, it may not always be human, but it must be relatable, what people can relate with, even if it is environmental, plants, ecology, ecosystem. It needs to be relatable because everybody is looking at it that, okay, so what? What's in it for me? What is my business with this thing? So we must bring out their business in the story of our research. Now, when we establish clearly the problem or the research question, we clarify the new knowledge, we bring it out. We don't leave people hanging, or we don't leave them to figure it out by themselves. What did you learn from the research? What new knowledge are you bringing? What solution? There are many problems in the world. What public health intervention did we do? And what was the solution? what was the solution. So recently I attended a conference and there was a presentation I listened to and it was fantastic. So someone had it's been established that there was a community in one country, that in one Asian country, that had issues refrigerating or storing rabies vaccine. Rabies vaccine is for dogs, right? So for infection against rabies, rather, yeah. So it's they identified that there was this gap. And what did they do? They called together people in the community. There was like an open call for people in the community um to develop local refrigerator, not refrigerator like that, local drums that could keep the vaccines preserved. It was naturally sourced commodities within the communities that those people used. It was a competition, and there was one that won. And that was what those people premised on to improve the lives of people in that community. So we need to clarify this and make sure that the new knowledge we are bringing on board has the human touch. It has something it is bringing. It is adding a value. And we need to understand, why is this research important to the audience? This will help clarify who the audience we should invite should be. Now we'll be looking at this sample. The article was published by Melvin et al. And if you look at the first part, it says what we were trying to do. Now, let's read together, please. When you started the study, some people got a cooling gel cough, while others got a cotton-filled cough. So there were two different interventions. We were trying to find out, this was their aim. We were trying to find out if daily cooling of the lower leg over the area where you had skin damage or a healed venous leg ulcer helped improve skin blood flow and prevented the ulcer from coming back. This is clear. Anybody who sees this understand it clearly. So this also means you can see that we had some little technical words like venous leg ulcer. Ordinarily, for a research, in communicating this to a researcher in the health profession, the person would understand this. But if we wanted to communicate this to a woman, a man in the community, we would have gotten a simpler word to use, right? But when you say skin damage, it is straight to the point. And this is quite simple. So everybody knows what they were trying to do. We also wanted to know if cooling helped with any discomforts, such as pain, itching, or burning you had in your leg, and if it improved your quality of life. It has the human touch. Anyone who sees this, see that it is bringing value to them. And see, in this life, everybody is quite selfish. I would ask, what is in it for me? Every other person asks, what is in it for me? So objectively, when we have such ideas, research ideas, please let's communicate it with colleagues even before we proceed to developing the proposal and the rest as just a thought. Once we clarify our thoughts, within 2-3 minutes, let's have a conversation, a side talk with colleagues. If the person understands the reason why you want to conduct the research, every other person will. But if the person really does not understand, then it will be more difficult to communicate the reason to other people. So we need to clarify this before we proceed. So to do this, we compare the results from those people with the cooling gel cough with those who got the cotton cough. Straight to the point. Straight to the point. This integrates background, objective, and a part of the methods, just a part of the methods. This is, if we want to communicate something like this to a policymaker or someone in such a category, a not too technical person, maybe a scientist too, but maybe not in our field. This captures the information completely. We don't need to produce 2 or 3 page documents when we can reduce it to a paragraph. It also pertains to the fact that we need to adopt the KISS strategy. KISS, keep it short and simple. K for keep, I for it, S for short, the last S for simple. Keep it short and simple. Any word, any evidence you want to present, and we need to remove redundant words. First of all, we need to remove redundant words. Some words, some sentences, some thoughts for 1 page, we can capture them in 3 lines and without losing the essence. So we need to be very careful when we proceed in communicating our research findings. Now, who was in the study? This same paragraph, I can write it in 2 or 3 paragraphs. Yes. So we need to be conservative as much as possible. Now, the study started in June 2011, rather, and finished in December 2015. There were 276 participants enrolled at 3 study sites in both South Carolina and Georgia. The average age of the participants was 62 years old. There were about equal numbers of men and women, and about 60% had diabetes and 75% had high blood pressure. Many people were taking 4 or more medications, which means many people had several health conditions in addition to various leg problems. This talked about who the people were, who participated, who were the participants. So it is important for us to clarify this. The shorter, the better. The shorter and more complete our information side, the tighter they are, the better it is, especially when we are communicating. People really don't have a lot of time. This webinar, we can actually extend it to 3 hours on a Saturday, but we want to keep it short and simple so people understand and take the lessons they need and move on immediately. So we need to beware when we are communicating our research findings to a scientific audience. Okay? Still on the article, the study question was, did the cooling gel cough compared to the cotton cough help with symptoms such as pain and improve quality of life? When we checked the background before, we saw it. It was clearly stated there. Now, what was the study result? Yes, the cooling gel coughs rather helped with reducing pain and improved people's quality of life, as determined by the pain and quality of life surveys you completed at each visit. Okay? This was especially true if you were an older woman, 65 years of age or older, weren't working much, were married, in brackets, both men and women, and lived in rural areas. This last part that I read, this last sentence, is talking about the factors associated. So, at times, someone could indicate the odds ratio here, depending on who the audience is. At times, we may not need to indicate the odds ratio, depending on who the audience is. For scientific articles, depending on the need at that point, we may or may not add the odds ratio. But this shows that those who were older, were not working much, were married, and living in rural areas were factors associated, or they were more likely to have experienced pain reduction because of the cooling gel coughs. Now, what we wanted to know and what we found, the study question, there were multiple study questions. Did the cooling gel cough compared to the cotton cough improve blood flow in the skin area and prevent ulcers? So what did we do? We measured skin blood flow with a laser Doppler and the thermometer over the affected area each time you came to visit, and asked about any new ulcers that developed. And what was the result? We thought it would improve skin circulation, but it did not. So that means there was no difference between the 2 coughs. So that is straightforward too. So our result needs to be as straightforward as possible. In conclusion, we have talked about the things to look out for, but I would like to emphasize it. In communicating our research findings to a scientific audience, the type of audience needs to be emphasized. Who are they? Where and how will they receive the communication? What do they know about the subject matter? Why are they motivated to receive the communication? We need to put ourselves in their shoes. It has some psychology in it, yes, but we need to put ourselves in their shoes so that we think like them and be objective like they are. Now, what is the purpose of the communication? Why am I creating this scientific communication? What challenge does this communication respond to? What do I want the communication product to accomplish? Then the format. What is the best format? Which format am I best prepared to work in? What constraints does the format impose? And how do I minimize the constraints? Okay, then to the significance. What is the research story? What is the story? Then we need to get feedback from our colleagues and revise it. So it is not always in its ready to go form at the first in the first draft. It needs to be revised. Share with a colleague. Peer review cannot be overemphasized. Let someone take a look at it. If the person understands, others are likely to understand. And then we can, after completing this, proceed to map our audience and the rest, and finalize the mapping rather, finalize the mapping and communicate the invitations to our audience. In conclusion, effective scientific communication requires a careful analysis of the scenario and its ability to highlight the research significance in a narrative form. Every research has a story. And by analyzing the audience, purpose, and format of your communication, you prepare to tailor scientific communications to your target audience and scenario. Here are the references. Thank you very much, everyone. So at this point, we would like to take questions and comments from you. Do you have any question or clarification you are seeking based on the presentation or any other related question? Okay, so I'll be handing over back to the moderator who would coordinate the Q&A session. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Ma, for a very beautiful presentation. I'm sure we've all learned a lot, myself inclusive. So, like I said earlier, if we want to ask questions, we can use the hand raise icon and you'll be called upon to ask your questions. If you feel more comfortable sending your questions to the chat box at this point, that is also okay. Then also please the social media pages of the organization has been put into the chat box. Please kindly follow us on all social media platforms to keep informed of all our activities. Thank you very much. So I'll be going through the chat box now to see if we have any questions. I'm also going through to see if there are any hands raised. While we are still writing our question and collecting our thoughts, I have a question because I was listening intently and taking notes seriously. And for me particularly, I'm very involved or very interested in health policy. And there's always been the talk of how can you translate your research findings into policies that would be implemented, etc., etc. So now my question is, how can I pitch my research findings to a policymaker, a stakeholder, someone that can fund me without sounding too desperate?
Okay, thank you very much. I would quickly attempt to answer the question. Yeah, so firstly, I would want to say that for every research, you have an action plan or action point, a call to action. Now, once you have clarified this and it is well thought out, it is well documented, one of the things, opportunities that we can leverage is to join communities of practice. Communities of practice, yes. There are communities of practice for different components of health. So even in health policy, I believe you would have a particular component that you are interested in. So there are adolescent communities of practice, sexual and reproductive health communities of practice, I think NCDs, non-communicable diseases, and the rest. So there are opportunities we can leverage through our mentors who can link us up with communities of practice. These communities of practice, I think, some of them meet once monthly. There is a national community of practice for different components of health. So we can source information on how to join them. We may, as much as we wish to, at times we may not be able to push for policy changes or amendments. But by the time we leverage existing groups that have been trusted over time and we share our findings with them, they are likely to push it further. But that does not mean that our we will not be acknowledged for our inputs on it. No. And in addition, policies are in different levels. Yeah. Some policies are at the national level, but there are some at the state level. So one other thing we need to do and ensure is that sometimes we need to prepare the levels. Who needs to listen to this? Who, at what level in Nigeria or in my country do we require action for this? There are some, well, maybe not policies, but there are some action points that may be for household heads. There may be some action plan or points, some call to actions that are for women in the community. So if we clarify this, it will help us so that we don't overcongest the national when we need to actually communicate the findings or the action points to the people in the community who actually need to take up the responsibility. So it's good we clarify this, and it would help us. But like I said, communities of practice are a way to go. Like for sexual and reproductive health, there is an IBP network that exists, and they share timely information. At times, they communicate that, oh, if you are interested in joining communities of practice, if you are interested in registering as a member, please subscribe so that to our mailing list so that you can receive timely information. So those details exist. We just need to ask the right question from the right people so that they communicate, they help us, they support us. And to some of us in our institutions, there are some professors or some doctors, some of our senior colleagues who can actually show us the way. So please, let's ask questions and let's reach out for support. I'm sure they'll be glad to support us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was like a whole lot to digest, and I think that speaks to my question, and I'm sure a couple of people also had that on their mind. But as you were speaking, it just reminded me of a follow-up question that I have, because it's something that I've experienced personally and I've really not gotten the hang of it totally at this point. So in the situation where you go for a conference and then you are interacting with different people in the conference, and then you see someone that is probably a stakeholder along the lines of what you're doing, and then is of course the conference, people are just passing by, you have just 1 minute, 2 minutes to make your point, 30 seconds sometimes to make your point. How do you compress? I mean, you've done the research, you're passionate about the research, you know a whole lot. If given 24 hours, you could speak on the research for that long. But how do you find the way to compress whatever it is you want to say within 30 seconds, 45 seconds, 1 minute, and give this person, and this person is able to understand and then vibe or connect with you, and then you work together? How do you do that?
Okay, so I think I will share a tip that one of my senior colleagues shared with me. So for every research finding, you need to structure it. Must know. The first should be must know. So if it is just 30 seconds you have, must know. Like there is a must know part, which is the crux of your work that can actually sell your work in 1 or 2 sentences or 3 sentences to the person you're speaking to. So the must know or most important part, yeah. The good to know. That good to know. If you have additional time, you can present it. And then you can just keep expanding and expanding. Right? Then other things, other relevant things. At times we are tempted to say, oh, this research, I cannot cut the findings. Now, at a point, I attended a conference, I think in March 2024. Yes. So when I attended the conference, I was invited to prepare, not prepare, it was an impromptu thing rather. So I was invited to speak for 1 minute on my research. On my research. Now, my research had been conducted among 739 women of reproductive age who have been ever married in Ibadan, who have been ever married and had at least one living child in Ibadan. Now, the first thing I did was just to, on my mind, because I conducted the work myself. So you need to understand clearly what you did and minimize words. So what I did was I just thought about it. Okay, what was the gap? Sentence one. What did I do? Sentence two. What did I find? So the most interesting finding that I said was, oh, 1 out of every 10 married women in Ibadan, Nigeria, have intended to abort their pregnancy. So that was the selling point. So if the person is interested, the person, oh, really? So one out of every 10 married women in Ibadan, Nigeria, have ever considered having an abortion. And these were the factors. So I just mentioned about 2 interesting factors, and that was it. So in 30 seconds, once we practice over time, in 30 seconds, you can actually prepare or talk about 4 sentences. In 30 seconds, 45 seconds. We need to keep it short and simple. And there are some opportunities we cannot trade. There are some opportunities that come just once in a lifetime. So we should not misuse those opportunities, as they can help to shape our career. So we need to, while going for conferences, we need to think about it. Okay, if someone asks me, what is my research on? I know the person will not have 15-20 minutes. I know the person may not have it, but if the person asks for, in 1 minute, I have a meeting now with the president. What did you find? I have just a minute. I should be able to clearly say what I did. So the must know, there is that part of your study. So segment your study into the must know, good to know, then the not too important, and then other. So it will help to arrange logically our study in order of relevance, and then we'll be able to maximize every opportunity that we have. I hope I answered your question. Yes, so and someone else said, would the recording be made available? Yes, the recording would be made available via the organizers. I think they would be sending the recording, the link to the recording via the link email addresses you registered
Yeah.
with. So
Yeah.
over to you, moderator. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, ma'am. So please, I would like to mention again, if we have any questions, we can use the hand raise icon or send our questions to the chat box. If we have any questions, so I'll be going through now to check if we have any questions in the chat box, or if we see anyone raising up their hands to ask a question. While we are doing that, let's also not forget to follow on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on X. The links have been put into the chat box, so that makes it easier for us to go directly to the page and follow to keep updated on our activities. You can also go to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we usually put the recordings also of these sessions in our YouTube channel, so you can easily access them. You can save it be able to watch offline later on YouTube as well. So that makes things easier. So any questions? Any questions? I'm not seeing any question on the chat box. Let me go through the participant list to see if anyone is raising up their hands. I still have a question, but I would like to give everyone a fair opportunity to ask questions as well. Okay, so I'm going through the participant list and I'm seeing that there is no question or no hands raised rather. So I think I'll just take one more question from myself, and if there's no question in the chat box or any hands raised, we'll call it from there. So my last question is, if as a researcher there are different contexts. For example, the context in Nigeria is different from the context in the US. Let's use a topic, for example, mental health. So when I talk about mental health in Nigeria, it might be a bit diverse from the issues that they are particular about in the United States. For example, in Nigeria, you might be talking more about awareness, talking more about decriminalizing suicide, attempted suicide, education, postpartum depression, etc., etc., things like that. But meanwhile, in the US, they might be more involved or focused on gender and other things. So now, as a researcher, the first thing is, how do you reconcile communicating your research findings in this part of the world to a colleague who is a potential partner in probably a high income country where the priorities slightly differ? You're in the same field, but the priorities differ. How do you communicate your research findings in such a way that you people are able to partner up, and also potential funders, majority of them come from those high income countries? How do you reconcile your research findings with getting their funds, seeing that the priorities, even though within the same field, may differ?
Okay, thank you very much. I'll try to briefly answer those two questions. So the first thing is that research is contextual, first of all. So, but for you who is about to collaborate with a colleague in a high income country with differing or different interests, first of all, I would say you need to find a convergence point so that it would be a win-win for the two. So the first you could do, do a negotiation with the person, yes, and you can start with let's say postpartum depression, if it is of concern, of public health concern in your own setting, or you go with teenage suicide in that high income country, depending on which one you both agree to come first with, to implement first. But there is always time to, it will be good you harmonize your thoughts. At times you could have some research being conducted in like Nigeria and other African countries. But if it is high income country versus low income country, the people are different, the needs are different, the priorities are different, but you need to harmonize and ensure that it's a win-win on both sides so that one person does not feel that his interests or values are not being considered. That's one. For the second question, now for funders have their goals. And many times, the funds we get from high income countries, in African countries, and other low middle income countries, they have a target. They have a target. So if I am interested in reproductive health, for instance, and I have a project on menstrual hygiene and I've been preparing proposals on menstrual hygiene. By the time I see that call for funding or call for proposals and request for quotations and the rest, I should be able to put it in. So we cannot always um, prepare documents that every funder or every donor on earth wants or prioritize, because we have our own interest, we have our own scope. if I am in the health sector and a funder or a donor advertises calls for proposals in agric sector, if I cannot look for a synchronization between agriculture and health, or agriculture plus livelihood plus health, then I am not fit to submit a proposal for that call. Another call will be out. But I want to tell us that there are for for us that are in the health profession, health is diverse too. HIV, non-communicable diseases, and the rest. There are a whole lot of opportunities out there for us. We can always check. There is a platform called NGO funds. Yeah, NGO funds. If we go through it, there are so many opportunities for different countries. Almost every day, there are opportunities that are advertised. Fund for NGOs, rather. It's fund for NGOs. Yes, Nigeria and other countries. So if you have if you may also need to, for you or any other person on the call, you may also need to reach out to potential collaborators in any other country. And it will be good if you have similar interest, first of all, and diverse expertise. Oh, someone is a statistician, another is a demographer, I am a public health physician, another is a pediatrician, so that depending on the call for proposals, we can always make any one of us who is more experienced in the field to be the lead investigator, to be the principal investigator. We can have 4 proposals running parallel or running simultaneously, but the principal investigators differ based on the field in which we are applying for the proposal at that time. So I think, was I able to answer your question?
Yes, that was very clear, apt, and then action point oriented. So, and thank you very much, by the way, for the tip on the funds for NGOs. I think that's an amazing opportunity that we all can leverage and capitalize on to access opportunities. Because one of the things that was on my mind as a presenter was talking, as a speaker was talking, was the conferences. So seeing that you're giving us an opportunity to access opportunities, we thank you for that. So finally, once again, before we round up, I'd just like to inform us that the social media handles have been put on the chat box. Please kindly do well to follow us on our social media platforms so that you can keep updated and informed of all our activities. So without further ado, seeing that there is no other question, there's nothing left for us to do. We'll be rounding up this session, but please let's not forget that this time next week, Saturday, you can also join us as we dive deeper into other research topics, seminar topics that we'll be discussing. That's why you need to follow us on social media pages so that you can actually see and anticipate what we have in store for you next week. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this session. Do have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much.